So today joining us, we have 7 experts with extensive experience in establishing cross-sector collaborations. They come from the industry, universities, and research organizations, and they're going to share their viewpoints on the topic of how to build long-lasting collaborations. So the topics that we're covering today would be academia-industry interactions, the knowledge transfer between these sectors, and how such engagements have changed over the years. And we're honored to have, I'm going to introduce our 7 speakers today. So Mr. Peter Voigt, who is the founder and executive director of CleanTech. So Peter, so Mr. Richard Taub, the Australia Manager, University Programs at Ford Motor Company. Professor Madhu Bhaskaran, Professor at RMIT University. Professor Milan Brandt, Distinguished Professor at RMIT University. Professor Peter Hodgson, Professor at Deakin University. Dr. Kathie Foley, Chief Scientist at CSIRO, and Dr. Kathie McGregor, the Director of the Active Integrated Matter Future Science Platform, which is also known as the AIM-FSP at CSIRO. So thank you all for joining us. I'm just going to go through the flow of events. So we would have 5-minute talks from each panel member, and during this time we would get to know about their career journeys and also their general viewpoints on this topic. I'm sure this would be really interesting and inspiring for our audience as well. And I'll request that you hold any questions you have at this point till all the talks are done, and you can voice them out during the panel discussion, which we're going to have. So we'll have 45 minutes of panel discussion, and we'll dive deeper into the topic of building long-lasting collaborations. So the first up on our talks, Peter Voigt, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm honoured to be set off on the rock first and see what happens here, eh? A little bit of background first on who I am. In the past, for my sins, I'm a RMIT guy. So chemistry and biochemistry. Back in the, I'm not so sure, but it might have even been called the Working Men's College back when I did my degrees. Feels like that long ago. So I spent quite a lot of time there at RMIT, quite a lot of time at Melbourne University, and then also worked in Arnott's and Mars Inc. In various technical capacities. And around about, I guess, 1990, I made a decision that I ought to figure out whether or not I could fend for myself. Seemed to be making quite a lot of money for the likes of John and Forrest Mars. And they didn't really need it, being the multi-billionaires they are. So it was back then that I came up with the idea that environmental engineering seemed to be a damn good place to have a try. So I literally started off in Albury-Wodonga in the back of a house, decided to build a company called CleanTech. And CleanTech started out of the, shall we say, the ashes of technology around the IP from the University of Eindhoven in Holland, where I basically convinced some people there that we should set up a company in Australia looking at the use of biocatalysts for air pollution control. And so back then we were one of the first companies to actually start building what are now commonly known as biofilters, biotrickling filters, etc., etc. And probably between 1990 and 2000, we built quite a lot of these things. And we were at that stage just a little private company and doing a little bit of research in the background, but really bootstrapping ourselves up. So CleanTech at that stage probably grew from something from $1 million a year in revenues, maybe up to, at its maximum, $5 or $6 million a year in revenues. It was around about this stage in 2000 that I met some characters from Russia at an Austrade convention who were talking about technologies that they used in Russia for gold and uranium extraction. At that stage, I was a little bit dubious. Maybe, you know, the old Russian scams might be come to mind here. But over the next 2 years and working with them, I found that the technology that they were talking about is really quite cool. And so I did a technology agreement with the All Russian Institute of Chemical Technology and brought to Australia what now is we call it continuous ion exchange technology, but it's technology for the extraction of metals from ores and pulps. Based on this knowledge that I gained through this interaction in gold and uranium, we started building resins that could actually extract nickel and cobalt from pulps, and got an R&D start grant back in about 2004 for maybe $2 or $3 million. And we worked on that for quite a few years, for 3 years. And at the end of that, we actually had ourselves resins and processes for the extraction of nickel and cobalt from laterite ores. Back then it was a big deal. Nickel was booming, etc. Managed to get myself a deal with BHP, and BHP licensed the technology from us and paid us a handsome license fee for that technology. And we thought, fantastic, we're off to the moon. BHP's now behind. But little did I realise that also technology can also be put on the shelf, and that's where BHP put it for quite some time while the nickel price was depressed. But getting that license fee got me kind of enthusiastic enough to say, I've got to grow this company as fast as possible. So after looking around for money everywhere, I decided to list it on the ASX, would you believe? So back in 2008, we went onto the ASX as a microcap, and then suffered all the sorts of things that microcaps suffer from for the next 6 years. So without a good marketing penetration, etc., you do tend to kind of sit on the bottom of the penny dreadful list. So that was not a fantastic time, but during that time we also brought to bear a lot of research and development on bringing this continuous ion exchange technology into the water treatment market, and we've got quite a few patents around that area. I happened to meet my Brad Pitt of investors in about 2016, a guy by the name of Robert Friedland, who's the #1 mining entrepreneur in the world. And when he saw what we were doing, he decided to buy into cleantech, and he brought with him a whole battery of investors. So all of a sudden we went from being someone that no one knew to someone that just about everyone in the world knew, because when Robert opens his mouth, everyone listens. So again, having great technology, fantastic. You've got to have a spruiker as well as great technology, a promoter. So having him around has changed the world significantly for us. We acquired an ore body in New South Wales, previously known as Black Range, which we then rechristened into Sunrise, which has got a really good deposit of nickel, cobalt and scandium in it. And so having these metals in the ground all of a sudden made us become a materials company. As you can understand, nickel, cobalt, fantastic for EV batteries. That's one of the areas that we're doing a lot of research and development in. And scandium as a with aluminium is a pretty cool sort of deal as well. So scandium aluminium alloys for lightweighting. So all this has now kind of turned us into a bit of a, shall we say, an energy company by default. But and so we're now very busily working on getting the design of this facility in New South Wales up and running. It's a multi-billion-dollar project, so it's going to require quite a lot of investment. But it does produce quite a lot of nickel and cobalt for EV. We're going to go straight to the final precursors, if we can, for the EV batteries. And we're also going to take quite a deal of scandium, more scandium than the world's ever seen before. So again, we've got to have offtakes for scandium. And again, we're talking to the lightweighting industry, aircraft, construction, etc. Just on the aside now, and right at the end, I've just now started another little company up on the side, which is now working with Monash IP around graphene. And we're also attempting to build ourselves a graphene oxide membrane for water treatment. And we've managed to kind of almost crack that one. And we're very, very close now to having a commercially manufacturable graphene oxide membrane that would act in the kind of nanofiltration range and take out everything. Wouldn't take out salts, but takes out everything else and does it very low pressure with very low energy. Now, all these things have got the materials in them that I've had to learn a lot about. But I would say that to everyone that the thing that's allowed me to go on the journey is being able to be multidisciplinary about things. So if you find yourself in one discipline vertical, I would be suggesting very, very quickly find a way to break out of that vertical and make sure the innovation exists at the interfaces of the disciplines. So there you go. There's a kind of a journey of a little company that started off, was probably worth $1 million in 1990. At one stage in 2019, we were worth $1 billion as a company. And we're not $1 billion anymore. We're back to about 150 million. That's what happens. You're either a prince or a pauper. But it's been a fantastic journey. And a lot of it's been done in collaborations with the university, CSIRO, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of my quick pass through time.
Thanks for sharing, Peter. We look forward to hearing more from you, from your rich experience. Thank you. Richard, over to you.
Okay, hi guys. So my name's Richard Taub. I've graduated from Melbourne University Bachelor of Engineering back in 1994. I did a Masters by Engineering course with the ANU, was based in the stamping plant in Geelong at the time, and got my first insight into industrial experience and how a press shop works, looking at optimising stamping of a particular panel or a couple of panels, which was good experience. I then went on to work for Daimler Chrysler as a heavy commercial vehicle product and liaison engineer, which was also an interesting experience, learning how to drive a semi-trailer and a few other things. And then started work at Ford Motor Company in 1999, and I've been with them ever since. Worked predominantly in body structures on domestic platforms and Falcon and derivatives thereof, so Falcon and Wagon and Territory. And then we got the gig to do the T6 Global Compact Pickup in around about 2005, and I joined that program in about 2008 and travelled a little bit with work, and then carved out a technical role, which then sort of grew and started to encompass collaborating with universities. And then that I was able to grow that part of the business and really connect well with the research team in Dearborn, and so now that's what I do full time. So it's been an interesting journey. It's been quite rewarding. I feel very fortunate to do that role. And I've been working quite hard in the last 6 years to really build up Ford Motor Company of Australia's connections with the Australian University, I guess, landscape and in the research centre, really provide a value stream into what we're doing globally. My viewpoints about establishing cross-sector collaboration is really that meaningful relationships are long-term and they take time to build, and you have to be patient and kind of have a long-term enterprise view. It's very much about mutual interest and mutual benefit and about developing trust. And luckily we've been able to do that, I think, with all the partner schools that we've got our agreement signed up with, and we're always open to work with others as well. And that's one of the great things about the Australian university space, is that it's not competitive in the same sense that, you know, the Australian universities seem to be more than happy to collaborate with each other and industry, and that's like a little bit of a breath of fresh air compared with the US and Europe in some times. So that's to our advantage, and maybe that's out of necessity, but it's certainly worked well for us, and looking forward to continuing to do that into the future.
Thank you, Richard. We'll all be curious to know what strategies you use to build up these connections with the universities. Next, we have Madhu.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And just to give you a little bit of introduction about myself and also about the journey so far. So I'm a professor of electronics engineering. So I'm based out at RMIT University, and I've been there for a really, really long time. Not as long, my memory doesn't go as far back as Peter's, but have been there for quite a while. So I got my PhD from RMIT in 2009. And then I've stuck around in various roles and gone up the career ladder now to become professor. So I think for me, it started off as being as a typical academic. I still continue to be an academic. And I think as a typical researcher, there wasn't so much about industry collaborations or, you know, reaching out to other sectors. I think almost until 5 years ago, the typical first 6 to 7 years post PhD was more of being a researcher, publishing, and, you know, making sure you publish well and making sure you're attracting the Austrian Research Council funding and doing all the right things to take off those kind of goals. But I think at some point, you know, being an engineer kind of kicks into you, and you kind of feel incomplete if you don't get all that fantastic research results which you get in the lab out into the market, and somehow, getting it out into the market is not something which I can do from start to finish. And that's where the cross-sector collaborations really come in. So I work predominantly on electronic devices. A lot of the technology which we develop within the group are done within clean rooms. So we work on micro and nanotechnologies done within multi-million-dollar clean rooms. And so it is a bit hard for me to imagine, translating something like that to a manufacturing scale and working with industry and translating that out into the market. The typical examples almost always which are given are about Intel. So given Australia doesn't really have an electronics industry, you kind of stumble along that journey a little bit in the beginning. And because we work on electronics which are as thin as a Band-Aid and which can be conformal and which can be wearable, that is pretty much the breakthroughs which we had within the group in 2015. So we managed to make stretchable electronics which are really thin and on a contact lens type material, which means you can attach it onto your skin or attach it onto your body, onto your clothes, and monitor the external environment or monitor the inside of your body. And that was pretty much where we started working quite closely with industry. I've gone and personally knocked on industry's doors, but somehow that's never really been the way to initiate the collaborations. The way most of the collaborations in our group has kicked off is when we put out a media release around our work, or when I go and speak about my work at public forums. That's pretty much been the place where I've met most of my industry partners, or they've got in touch with me through LinkedIn because I've spoken about the exciting research results we had or put out some posts on social media. So never has it been an industry partner who has come to me saying, I read that interesting journal article of yours. Geez, it was fantastic. Let's talk more about that. Never has happened. So I think it's almost a different school of thinking when it comes to, attracting and talking to industry partners. And flexibility was key. So a lot of the initial conversations I had, I remember getting a lot of industry phone calls and I was really excited and optimistic. And after the 30th phone call or 30th meeting, the optimism wears off. But I kept going. And I think that's the optimism in me in some way or the other. I keep taking every phone call and keep taking every meeting. And being flexible, not just like my technology, but also in attitude really, really helped. Because I realized as much as I was keen that my technology monitors the external environment, the industry partners who were talking to me were more interested in using the technology for the healthcare space. So we almost had to redefine the way we are working with the technology. So almost all the industry partners I have today, which is nearly 6 or 7 of them, most of them are startup companies, but almost all of them are within the healthcare space, on the aged care space. And that includes the international companies I work with as well. So I think that amount of flexibility kind of helped in having those initial conversations. And a lot of those collaborations now include cross-sector collaborations as well. So and also cross-disciplinary collaborations. So we also have people from School of Design who work with us quite consciously because we're trying to think about the end user interaction with the product. We're also trying to think about what the design of the final product is going to be. So having those people roped to the journey really early, that's been immensely helpful to allow us to envision a product which finally hits the market. I'll pretty much finish up there, but I'll maybe leave it at the quote, which I read yesterday, which it said, you can invent alone, but you cannot innovate alone. And I think that's true to all the collaborations which I have right now in that space. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Madhu. It's interesting how social media plays such a big role in this. Next, we have Milan Brandt.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, and I guess thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of my journey. And
Milan, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Sorry, is that better?
No.
No.
Try to mute and unmute.
No, and the other option is to just take the video off so we just hear your beautiful voice.
Yeah. Hear me now? Is it better? Sorry, guys.
It's a little better.
And now the whole thing is breaking up. Sorry. I'm not sure whether the people here is doing something.
No,
Okay.
I think.
You want to go to the next person?
Yep, Yep, we'll give Milan some time to fix this technical issue. Next, we'll go to Peter Hodgson. Peter, you're muted.
No, still can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Peter.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Too much technology here. So first of all, welcome everyone to this session today. I'm a really big, passionate person about the whole thing about industry and academic collaboration, and we've heard some really good stuff already so far. I think that Madhu's stuff was actually really interesting about her experience. As she said, you actually have you have to actually keep taking calls time after time after time sometimes. At Deakin, I guess my background just is I worked for obviously for BHP Steel for 16 years, then came to Deakin. At that time, Deakin had no real research in metals or materials. I like to think now we're #1 in Australia for materials engineering. RMIT might disagree, but we actually we've built a very strong industry relationship, and we have a lot of startup companies as well. Here in Milan, I can see Milan now. The thing I have a few simple rules, do's and don'ts. The first do is be interested. You never know what the conversation will lead to. If someone calls you up about one thing, it may lead to something else. You've got no idea. The first don't is never talk about money, because the reason for that is that if you have a really good proposition, if you have a good value proposition, the company will find money at some stage. My second do is bringing along your young, enthusiastic people with you to the meeting when you get a meeting. Because what I found with most industries is they love seeing the young people with passion, not just a grey-haired old person with a grey-bearded person like me. They want to see some young skin in the game. My second not to do is, again, don't ask for money. And so I guess what I'm trying to say the whole way through is, it's actually hard. It takes a lot of work to understand what industry needs are sometimes. And what I've found a lot of my colleagues do is they try to find a linkage grant or a CRCP. They're thinking about grants, because we actually, as academics, and I know Catherine's not from academia, but CSIRO, but we're always trying to think about how we may leverage that dollar into something else. Whereas what they're actually after is what are you interested in my problem? And so my view always has been is to put myself in their shoes, try and understand what they're trying to do, and try and understand whether I can actually help them get to a better place to improve their product. I think the other thing also is what we actually offer in academia is we offer international perspective. We can actually network with other companies, other things around the world who may be able to help a small company with a small idea grow bigger. So to me, I think that, one of the great things we do in Geelong is we actually are, to me, we're a little satellite city of Melbourne in Geelong, but we're actually a part of the world. And so we actually have research partners from everywhere, like every continent. I think this is probably right. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but by and large we have partners funding into Geelong because there are great ideas there. And what we're able to do is we're able to shape those ideas to make them. Oh, sorry, it's my Richmond thing's gone. Shape the ideas to a global perspective, and I think that's a really key thing. Is that we aren't just Australia. We are part of a global community, especially in metals, which is my area, and materials. And so I think that's really important that we actually are able to translate our ideas to a global context. And as I said, don't ask for money. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for bringing up the challenge of understanding industry needs. And today, I think we have the privilege of having experts from different sectors that we can come to a common understanding of what is really needed. So let's go with Milan again. Let's see if the technical issue is solved. So Milan, yeah.
Can you hear me? Is it still breaking up?
Oh, you're still breaking up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe go to Kathie and see. I'll go last and see.
Okay. Yeah.
Milan, you might want to just dial out and dial in again to see that the connection.
Yeah. Okay.
Next, we have Dr. Kathie Foley.
So hi everyone, so I'm Kathie Foley, I'm CSIRO's Chief Scientist. I've worked in CSIRO for 35 and a half years, and I've started as a postdoc and done 20 different roles over the time, including acting for Larry Marshall as the Chief Executive, which was always fun to do. But the thing that's really interesting is over that time, to be successful in anything I've done, it's always been about collaboration. Doesn't matter whether it's collaboration with the university or whether it's with an industry partner. And so I thought I'd make 3 quick points relating to it from a CSIRO perspective, which might be a bit different from a university perspective. It'd be interesting to see what the others think. So basically, collaboration should be all about partnership and relationship. And that it's not just about you and what you want out of it, but also what your, I guess, partner or your collaborator needs and wants out of it too. And quite often, when you start any relationship, you have to be seeing it as for the long term, because to have impact, it actually doesn't happen overnight. And you've probably heard from some of the others that they were long-term relationships they have with industry partners or with any successful research collaboration isn't just a flash in the pan. But the thing that's really interesting is, quite often when we have relationships, particularly ones that end up where people get married, they have prenups. And I think that's something we don't do often enough, is actually finding out before you start some of the rules of engagement, like understanding what each person or each party wants out of the relationship or the collaboration. And having some rules for engagement and sorting them out before you go too far down the line. I mean, when you get to the point of saying, yes, let's work together. So, what is the specific purpose or role of each partner in the collaboration? Intellectual property always rears its ugly head, and how do you actually deal with that so that, because at the end of the day, intellectual property is all about someone making money out of it. And to be frank, it's usually not you. It's usually someone else. And so therefore, your idea of ownership of intellectual property only needs to be so that it doesn't stop you from being able to continue researching in the area. So learning about how to engage with a collaborator, particularly industry, in a way that understands intellectual property is really important. It's not straightforward. And just having a patent or some some know-how is not what makes the money. It's actually someone doing a hell of a lot of development and hard work and taking risk and investment that's really important. And if they're successful, and you've got an arrangement in place that you get a little bit of their success story, then that's when things go really well, particularly when you're a researcher and not the commercializer. And then I guess the other one is, for many researchers, publication is very important. It's not so important in CSIRO, but it is very important for academic research, because that's the main metric of success. And so getting early on understanding of what the options are, so that you know that you have permission to be able to publish something, or that you can pace yourself so that you know you may not be able to publish something straight away, but you can further down the line, so you can write it up and have it in your top drawer to publish when it's no longer a sensitive matter, and the person, or particularly the industry you're collaborating with, is in a situation where something out there in the literature is not going to disadvantage them commercially. And I guess always be generous as a collaborator. I've found that the more generous I am, attribution and credit is as much as you can actually really makes a big difference. I guess the next thing is also to have impact, which is what, you know, particularly working with industry they're interested in. It's all about scale as well. And so looking at how can you focus on a few things, or focus on what's needed, so that you're able to deliver what your collaborator or industry partner needs. And understanding what it looks like to take what is a bench-like experiment or something at a small scale to take it up to something really much greater. And if you're at the stage where you've got something where you do want to look and collaborate to have impact, think about where all the big problems are, you know, from whether we have to feed, you know, lots of people without as much water, whether it's, you know, having industry and environment coming together so that they're partners, not competitors, or just even this global shift towards renewables. Each one of those, and because this is a Materials Australia event, every single of the greatest challenges we're facing at the moment has an important materials component to it. So when you're looking for a way of using your research to have impact, think about where it can, you know, have a way of supporting solving a major problem. And then realizing that you do have to think about how can you scale it up, how can you work with those who can take that, and it's hard work, and take it from the bench to something which really is able to be used. And then I guess the third point is that we do live in an era of networks. I think we've heard from some of the others already that you don't, Madhu, I really like that one, you don't innovate alone. And if you look at where success is, it's when you create a whole lot of groups working together in a network, so that everyone knows what their role is, they understand what part they're playing, and that it's usually interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, bringing together the engineering, the actual science, the marketing and business models, actually the commercialization model. If you think about things like major impacts from whether it's things like the way we listen to music or watch television or go to movies, it's actually now a very different business model. You can think of Amazon, who decided to sell books on the internet, as opposed to, and having a different business model where they made money not by selling you books cheap and then paying their bills a month later, and they made their money on the stock exchange by investing the money while they had it, while they were passing from one thing to another. Those sorts of different business models are actually part of what's necessary to be able to make a successful idea turn into an industry outcome for someone. So I guess we're going to be in an interesting future world where it's very exciting to see that post-COVID, there's a great opportunity for us as researchers to show how we can help the resurgence of the recognition of having sovereign manufacturing in Australia, of which materials is a major component of that. So I think we're going to be seeing the greater opportunities for collaborating more broadly with industry. And I'm just so pleased that you're having this event today so that we can talk about it a bit more.
Thanks, Kathie. It's really interesting how you brought up the post-COVID situation, and I think that will be discussed further later. Next, we have Dr. Kathie McGregor.
Thanks, Rajan, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you all. It's always tough coming at the end of a long list of speakers who've all made terrific points that you were thinking of making yourself. So I'll try and give you a quick overview of me and then maybe touch upon or extend a couple of points. I've had a fairly, typical academic career, PhD at Melbourne Uni, a couple of postdocs, both here and overseas, but I've always been attracted to research with a purpose. So I decided early on that a more typical academic career of research for knowledge and many publications probably wasn't what I wanted to apply myself to. But I was far more interested in seeing things used that I'd worked on. And that was typified by my first postdoc, which was actually at Monash University, but with CSIRO and the old Telstra research laboratories. I've always been involved in some sort of materials research as an electrochemist, and I've been involved in batteries, light metal production, alloys, sensor materials, and currently the position with the AIM Future Science platform is high-risk early-stage research, materials science meeting the digital world over a broad application domain. I guess expanding on some things that Kathie and others have said, I've had collaborations and really good collaborations both with university partners and also industry partners. And it's really important to understand the value proposition, your own value proposition and that of your industry or academic partner. Understand what you each need to be successful and then work out how to get there together. It's also useful to understand the commercial proposition and the business models. What is differentiating what you're doing from what else is available in the market? What time frame are you going to need to get there? Particularly in universities, the time frames, particularly if there are research students involved, are a lot longer than some of our industry colleagues would like. They're often after a solution to the problem in a much quicker time frame. So understanding the time frame to get there is really important. Another thing I've found useful with many collaborations with industry partners is perhaps for the sort of area of research that we've been doing, both in CSIRO and universities, I found the best sort of companies to work with are those that I characterise early adopters. I mean early adopters, it's the sort of company, whether they be a startup or another company, is that are prepared to take a little bit of risk on an earlier stage research which is not quite finished, not quite developed. And there might be a number of reasons that they want to be early adopters. They want to be first to market with something. They like working with new and innovative things. It gives them, it's something that they're attracted to. It's difficult to work with companies who are what I call more followers, who are saying, no, we're going to let you develop it, have it all finished, and then we're going to buy it. So again, trying to understand the value proposition and the partner that I'm working with, because sometimes it's not a good match. And I think Madhu was talking about 20, 30 and more conversations. And it's really about having that conversation to establish the relationship so that you're very clear on both what party wants to get out of it, so that there's a benefit for you both. Lastly, diverse teams. It's really good to have a diverse team of people, both in culture, background, gender, technical, commercial. You don't get there by one person in the laboratory sort of driving it. We all have different skill sets. So diverse teams and being able to speak a common language and across the value chain. I think that's about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathie. Yeah, it's so important to have diversity. And let's see if Milan is back. I think he is. Would you like to try again?
Okay, is that better?
Yes, a lot better.
I moved to another location in the house, you know, so I'm moving offices around. Okay, guys, sorry about all this. But look, a little bit about myself, and I understand we're sort of running out of time, so I won't dwell on my career too much. But I started many years ago as a physicist, Macquarie University, where I guess with Kathie Foley, we've known each other for many years. I did, as I said, my PhD was in laser physics, but then sort of soon after that I moved into the applications of laser technology to a whole range of areas, sort of laser cutting, laser welding, and more recently additive manufacturing. After completing my PhD, I worked for the Department of Defence. I had a bit of a checkered career for a couple of years, and then I worked for CSIRO for some 13 years, very much in the application area. So in terms of my interaction with companies, I guess I cut my teeth at CSIRO. I'm very much an applications person, and I like to see the technology being transferred. So my first, I guess, foray into the industry was transferring the technology we developed at CSIRO for laser drilling of sugar screens. And we formed a company, and that company is still going. And yeah, after 20 odd years. So it's really, I think it's a fantastic thing. It's employing Australians and exporting product overseas. After that, I joined Swinburne University, so became a true academic. So if anyone sort of looks at my publication record, they'll probably see that, I don't know, from my PhD to about 2000, there's sort of, you know, bumping on 1, 2, 3, 4 papers. But then after joining the academia, the publication is, as others have mentioned, is important for, I guess, our careers. But I also like to see that transferred into industry. So I've been involved with many CRCs, many industry partners, local and overseas. And at Swinburne University, one of the technology I developed for repair of laser blades, turbines, that then was transferred to a local company who basically commercialized the technology. I joined RMIT in 2010, so I've been at RMIT 10 years now, working very much in the additive space. We've got a fairly large centre and group, and the focus is very much in the bio area, where we're developing a new range of implants and working with companies like Stryker and others in that space. So I guess looking back at my career and involvement with industry, and I know others have mentioned that, it's really listening to your customers, pulling teams together. I mean, one person cannot do all this effort, very much a interdisciplinary effort. And of course, having the expertise to deliver what you promise. So maybe on that note, I'll leave it and open to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Milan. I think you're the one with all sectors, experience in all sectors, so we'll be looking forward to hearing from you later. So we're moving on to the panel discussion. We've heard from the speakers individually. Now we're going to bring them together. Hopefully we form a beautiful mess. So we're going to start off with a few basic questions, and I'm going to take questions from the audience as well. If you have questions, please post them up in the group chat. First question to our panel. So we've heard all of you talk about the approach to starting and sustaining collaborations. I hear a lot about understanding each other's needs. So from a company's point of view, university's point of view, and also research organization, what is it that you need, that you think you can contribute to the other sector?
Not takers.
Well, I might have a go. It's one where I think the first thing is understanding timeframes. I think Kathie mentioned that. So that if industry needs something tomorrow, they don't want a 3-year PhD project. So the other one is doing what you say you will do. So that if someone's investing in your research, you need to deliver what they're expecting. So you can't just suddenly follow your nose on something in another direction because it tickles your fancy a bit. Industry engagement is not free money or something. It's actually real money. Someone's not going on particularly a small to medium enterprise. Somebody in a small company's not going on an overseas holiday or buying a new car because they're investing in your research, and that it is real money. And I think respecting that is really important. And I guess also delivering what's needed and not the Rolls-Royce thing. You sort of need to understand what is it that, what does the endpoint look like? Because I think quite often when you're doing a research project in industry, you're never really sure at what point is the endpoint. And so having really clear milestones which you deliver to those and getting agreement on what their measure is to say that that milestone is agreed, is delivered is really important as well. They're things that come to my mind. Others might have some other ideas.
I think I've learned over the years that one of the things that's really important is when you're talking to the universities or to CSIRO or whoever, that you're fairly clear with what your goals really look like. Because a lot of the time when you start interacting in the research area, the products and that you're talking about are very much underdeveloped. And so you need to go through a bit that journey between underdeveloped and an output. And many times I find that what people have said that they're at, the position that they are at, is not quite true. It's a hope they were at sort of place. And what your money that you think is you're bringing them from an end product out of the university into the real world, normally I find I spend 1 to 2 years finishing off the research and development, which I thought I was actually getting on day one. So I almost build that now into my thinking and into my program of work. And it's really a great surprise when you find that the truth is really there. Now, I know, and in research and development, it is really hard, I've got to say, as to what phase you think that your development is at. So that conversation, if that conversation goes well, I find that I get a really good output, everyone's happy. That conversation has gone a little bit awry, then the whole program of works seems to not be on the track. You spend your time trying to get on the track.
I guess maybe I'll jump in from look, my interaction over the years with, I guess, companies, it's and you touched on this, Peter, it's really understanding what the problem is that the company is trying to solve, right? And then in a lot of the cases, working together with the company, I guess, to sort of focus that and also bring some sort of understanding from the academic perspective, or when I was with CSIRO, to the table. To help the company develop new product or new process. So that's been my experience. So working really very closely with industry to identify their needs and also be part of their, I guess, journey in terms of the product development.
Building on what you said, Milan, I think some real successes I've seen from CSIRO is where we've had people actually go and embed themselves in the company for a period of time and actually work in the company, and you get a much better understanding of sort of what the problem is and how it's been framed and how you can solve it. But yeah, that's what I meant by the value proposition, understanding what problem are you solving and what solution do we have. And touching on Peter's point, I think often particularly in the university sector, you take it to what I call a proof of concept stage, and you've proven the concept at the university, but there's an awful lot between proving concept and actually getting to the commercial product, and you can't do that in the university setting. It's really difficult to do. You can go to a certain point in CSIRO, and I think we understand in the areas that we work what point we go to, but there's always that bridge.
And the companies, just to add to that, I guess the companies sometimes don't understand what the limitations of different organizations are. So that's been my experience. And also I think universities do also tend to you're too eager to I guess help the company, but you've got to understand your limitations in terms of our infrastructure and our capability to deliver. So it is a fine balance.
Madhu, Richard, and Peter, would you like to add on?
Okay, I guess my perspective on this one is a little bit similar but different. I think that it is really interesting to try and find out what the company is, but we can do what the company wants, but they also have to understand I think it's part of this education thing two ways. We have to understand what the role of the university is, what the role of CSIRO is, and what the role of the company is. And one of the frustrations I have a little bit is that the organisations in Australia have been so stripped down over the years that they don't have a technology arm. And so the translation is difficult. So what Peter says is actually true. We do what we can do, but then there's this translation about from doing the not fundamental science, but from the to the proof of concept stage. And in Australia, we're very bad at going to the next stage, from proof of concept to scale up. And I'm dealing now with 3 startup companies at the moment, and all of them are struggling with this startup stage. Having said that, then we have another level above, which is the which we have with Forward, which Richard can probably stay a bit more with all the universities here, is a need to actually engage at a broader level for a organisation, which maybe have a HR element as well as actually a research element on a global platform. But I find it very frustrating to me is dealing with companies who don't have that interface. And so we're all struggling a little bit. Both the company, there's nothing wrong, but both the company and us are trying to find how we get that next stage going. And I'm sure it's safe for CSIRO as well. And whereas if you go to a big US company or a big, dare I say, Chinese company, there is a massive technology transfer arm in the middle. We just don't have that in Australia. We're very lean, and in the various cuts we've had, the technology arms have been the ones that have been cut first. So that's why,
Yeah, I'll maybe jump in here, and I completely agree with all your points, Peter. And also, Kathie, you made an interesting point where you mentioned, somebody from academia going and spending some time in industry. Coincidentally, one of our industry partners actually did the reverse. So they sent one of the industry people to spend some time at RMIT. And I think that really opened their eyes to, what the challenges are within the university sector. And I think that's been an interesting way for them to learn, the challenges around booking an instrument. If something goes, pear-shaped, then how things get affected and things like that. So that's been interesting as well. I'm glad they took the initiative to do that. And I think when I had my initial conversations with a lot of industries, I was kind of tending to overpromise. But I think with time, I've learned, things obviously take much longer than you hope they will take. And so now I probably more of underpromise and hope to over-deliver rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's it.
Richard, would you like to add?
Yeah, look, I think, I agree with that. And I think Peter touched on some points very well. And so in the role that I'm in, I guess, the advantage is that where I'm working for a very well-resourced organisation that's able to take a very strategic long-term approach. And because of that, we've got, processes in place and procedures in place to manage expectations from the start. We've got a lot of people who are experienced in working with universities, so we understand the difference, I guess, in the mindset. And on top of that, I think, particularly speaking from Australia's point of view, and particularly in the case with Deakin and ANU, but also with RMIT more recently with the Atlas Training Centre, we've been collaborating for a long time. Because we've been doing that, we understand each other's culture, and we've developed that trust, and so that goes a long way to making the relationship fruitful and valuable.
Just a very quick question from myself. So this is to probably Peter and Richard from the industry point of view. So Madhu mentioned that the industrial partners actually send someone to the universities to work with them. How easy is that for a company to implement in their bigger scheme of things?
So maybe I'll just quickly go first. So, again, for me, it's fortunate that, Ford Motor Company has a global research and advanced engineering function. And so that's, extremely well resourced. I mean, it's quite a challenging environment right now. The industry's suppressed and with Corona, obviously that's having an impact as well. But, you know, my role is a full-time role. And so there's probably not a lot of organisations that are able to, or have the luxury, particularly in Australia, to assign somebody full-time to manage university relationships. So, you know, it's like anything, if you put resource in, then you're going to be able to get more out of it. And so that's certainly making a difference for us, I feel.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the biggest thing is that companies are generally resource constrained somewhat, and to have the luxury of being able to, I guess, move an employee out of what is supposed to be their full-time job into the university, you've got to consider what those outcomes look like. But having said that, we did that, I think, over the past 6 months. We had a project going at RMIT, and by having our researchers very close to the RMIT people, we've got some fantastic outcomes. So sometimes, from an industry perspective, we are a little bit blind because we don't know what we don't know. So on the opposite side, I found that also some of the best work I've seen is when CSIRO actually embedded their people inside us. And the results we got out of that sort of collaboration were fantastic. And there, I'd have to say, is not enough of that type of thing happening at all.
Awesome. So we're moving on to the next question. This is from someone from the chat. So can we put different values on impact, particularly in supporting the national good? Impact in some areas very beneficial to society, others of limited benefit to Australian society, and could others be harmful? And how do we decide on that?
Oh, so I guess it's what do we mean by impact exactly? Is it generating jobs or, but that's another question. I mean, one of my little pet things, I guess, is being in academia. There's still push in academia to generate papers. I think things are changing. But I think we need to go more in that sort of direction of actually working very closely with companies and generating impact, new IP, new product, new processes. And I don't think, I know there's been a lot of discussion on this, but until the government changes the rules and how they assess universities through, ERA, where it's a lot of it's based on publications and new citations and everything else, I don't think universities will shift. Now, Peter he was a sort of a senior manager at Dick, and he might be able to comment on that, but that's my feeling. I mean, something has to come from above to drive the change within the university sector. And it's either whether the government goes, we're going to give you 50% of the funding if you, increase the number of patents, IP, or whatever, in that space. But at the moment, it's still very much paper-driven activity.
I'll maybe jump in here. So the ARC did run an impact exercise, I think it was last year, similar to the ERA exercise. There was an impact exercise where they, assessed all the universities for their impact. And I think one thing which came out of that is how long it takes for impact to actually come out. So, when I remember when RMIT did a collection, they just realized you can't basically count anything in the last 3 years, because even though it shows promise, there's nothing really quantifiable which came out of it yet. So I think there's a mechanism, and again, there's a question mark of how do you measure impact, right? I mean, it's not just about industry dollars and how do you measure that pathway, because there's a long, or sometimes even 10 years when you go from start of the research to the end product, but there has to be some ways to measure it in the 10 years in the middle. So I think the ARC will run that exercise again, but maybe they have to refine the way they also, how you quantify it and how you pick it up, the other stages of impact in the middle. And that's a question mark, in terms of how that can be done.
I had an interesting thing in is that I should turn a light on. Something got dark here, but anyway, is that how the definition between public good and impact research, as though they're not the same thing. So if you go through thinking, look, developing weapons of mass destruction and creating bioweapons and things like that, definitely not on. We have a very strong responsible research code in Australia, and all research organisations have signed up to it. And so I think that in general we only do responsible research in Australia, and so let's not worry about the stuff, the bad stuff that might lead to things which are unethical. But if, say, you look at things which we call as public good, like saving the Murray-Darling Basin, or environmental things of trying to save the Great Barrier Reef, if you actually look at what that means, there's some aspects of it is actually going through doing research to understand what the issue is. But there's also research that's needed to deliver a solution to solve that problem, and that's usually an engineered solution, and actually often with a materials requirement.
Yep.
So, for example, the Murray-Darling Basin, if we were going to understand the flows, we need to have a whole lot of new sensors that don't biofoul. We need to have whole systems, and someone has to actually manufacture them. They have to put them in place and then monitor and maintain them. And then people have to take that data and turn it into something that then delivers it to policymakers, or decision makers, so they can decide if the evidence suggests there's going to be a fish kill. Do we actually open the dams and flush them out in order to freshen them up to stop, you know, massive fish kills, and balance that against having enough water in a local area for just human health and livelihoods. So all those things some people could say, well, some of the public good is when you measure stuff, but actually delivering a manufactured product or material to make something happen isn't public good because someone's making money out of it. And I actually disagree with that. I actually think that anyone who's helping to build a business, deliver something that has creating jobs and growth, I'm sounding like a politician here, but that actually is just as important as public good work as it is sort of trying to sort of understand environmental problems to save the koalas in New South Wales, for example. And even if we are going to save the koalas who are on the brink of extinction in New South Wales, it's not going to be people just doing good feeling things. Someone has to do a business. A business is part of this. So that it's. I think that sometimes we have a somewhat naive approach to how this all fits together, and that research is in buckets, when in actual fact it all is a sort of an ecosystem of stuff where all the different parts have a place to play. And what we've not been good at in Australia is actually recognising that and celebrating it. And part of it goes back to I think it might have been Milan's mentioned that you know, quite often we end up with too much competition between the different parts of the sector instead of actually looking at everyone playing their piece and putting it, working collaboratively together to deliver the impact. Because you can't, you need all the parts. And so I think it'd be great to think about it differently. I'm going to turn the light on.
So I agree with what Catherine was saying, and somewhat along those lines. I think we want to think about sovereign capability and maintaining a conversation around that. And it seems that from time to time, you know, it becomes important and then it goes away, and there's the next thing that's on the news is the most important thing. But I think, you know, one of the things that Corona's highlighted is our severe gap in sovereign capability and how that's exposed us. And so whatever it takes to maintain that conversation and keep people interested in and thinking about what's important for the country in the next 5, 10, 15 and 20 years, rather than what's the next problem in the next 3 months. I think that's what's going to be, you know, useful. And in having that conversation, there's plenty of smart minds around that can work out the roadmap to what we decide success looks like. But if we're not having that conversation, then it just becomes one of the many things that people talk about, and it might slip through our fingers before we know it.
I think that in the material space, you know, let's face it, Australia's blessed, but what we do with our materials is, you know, pretty crook. You know, the fact that we dig them up and send them out to the rest of the world is just very, very, very short-sighted. How do we change the mindset where companies make a lot of money just digging things up and sending them out. Just look at the value chain in the EV battery. If you just look at what the cost of the raw materials are that go in, you know, they might be $1. Cost of precursors, you know, it might be at $2, and the cost of the batteries is $7. And yet what we do is we pick stuff up and send it off. We're just not sustainable long term here in Australia if we don't change the way we think about things.
But Peter, just to, I guess, the question for you, I mean, one of the issues I see is really it's the government policy with a lot of these things. I mean, you look at some of the overseas countries where, you know, the government is committed. It's like the Korean shipbuilding industry, right? It's like 30, 40 years commitment. I don't know, successive Australian governments have never really committed to anything, whether it's Labor or Liberal. It's always left to the, I guess, the industry and university sectors. No one wants to pick a winner, but sometimes it's like the electric car or, you know, the batteries, where the government says, well, you know, we want you to have this industry and that's it. We will put money into it.
Yeah, well, no one's going there unless we know it's long-term, sustainably profitable, and we've got everything here to put an electric battery, everything, and then in overseas. But you know, the politicians will say, "Well, we aren't here to pick winners." Well, I'd suggest that's totally back to front. They are actually their winners. Yeah, they're using our taxpayer money, and there's got to be a better way to do it than what we do in Australia. You're right about the level playing field. We've got the levelest playing field, I think,
in the world.
The trouble is that everything drains to where we're moving, and it ain't the place to be. We need to get onto higher ground.
I suspect that mindset has actually been over successive governments' view from Treasury and some of the economists who have felt that we should be a mining, services and tourism, and that should be what we do. And the awesome opportunity in front of us at the moment as material scientists is that I think there's an opportunity for a reset, because there's been a recognition that we need to do more than that. We might not always be able to make what we want, but we should be able to make what we need, and that definition of what we need and having flexibility and having, I mean, there is advanced manufacturing, you know, in this country, and it's well and alive, but maintaining it and nurturing it, I think is going to be really important going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of the things that we can do right away is to encourage and support STEM and get younger people, you know, interested in science and technology and engineering and materials from an early age, and you know, emphasize the importance of it, the importance, you know, of engineering and materials to the national effort, so that, you know, it becomes something rather, because engineers tend typically to be introverted and like to sit in corners and solve problems and not be bothered, and we need to learn to be more extroverted and more entrepreneurial and more out there and put our point of view forward and put it forward, you know, in a sort of affirmative way, and this is what we believe and this is why we believe it, and get people a little bit more on the front foot. And so, you know, I agree very, you know, to a large extent, Milan, with what you said, but also I think, you know, the political sphere will respond to what the electorate wants. And if the electorate says they want manufacturing back in Australia and they want to be able to make steel and ships in Australia, well, then they're going to do what, you know, what the electorate's going to vote for. So to some extent, it is up to us, but it's a tricky one. But I think, but you know, encouraging and maintaining the discussion going, I think, is important.
Awesome. I'm going to move on to the next question. So how do you manage expectations during an industry collaboration? So be it the company vision versus the researcher's vision.
You talk about it a lot. You over-communicate. You have meeting. You have to be prepared to be invested. If you're not prepared to be invested, then you are going to be disappointed. So that's what I've found. I've found, even though I hate meetings with a passion, I find that if I am prepared to spend an hour twice a week sitting down talking with the researchers, then that changes everything. I've found the expectations don't get misaligned.
Yeah.
And some of the discussions are fairly brutal, but at least you're having them. Things don't get hidden from you then. And I think then you get this respect goes both ways, I find. So to me, it's really about communication.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think that also that there is a role of the senior researcher as opposed to the junior researcher. So I think my role as a senior researcher is always to be at the interface, trying to manage expectations both ways. So, can't remember who was said before. I think it was Madhu. You want to over deliver as opposed to over promise. And so, what I see a lot of young researchers doing is over promising and then screwing up because they can't deliver their things on time. What an experienced researcher does is they work out what can be done potentially, but then also try and, because you are developing young people. I mean, the thing about this whole thing sometimes, that if you have PhD students or a first year postdoc or whatever, they're learning. And the company has a real need. And so you're trying to find a match, We're different to CSIRO, who have permanent full-time researchers as a university. We have a churn of younger people coming through. And I think that the experienced researcher, what they can do is work out what is a reasonable amount to be done, and then trying to over-deliver. I think it's always great to come to a meeting and say, "Oh, you asked this, we've got all of this." And I think also the other conversation we had earlier on was about publication versus whatever. You can do both, I think, as well. So, but again, it's about the experienced researcher injecting themselves into the process. Richard and I we must go back 15, 20 years, I guess, Richard. And so we deliver on the projects and we deliver on papers for the university satisfaction, etc. Because also the thing is, what we do, if you have a long-term relationship with a company, what we say is the papers then allow you to go for linkage grants and CRCPs because there's an established relationship. And so again, it's about each side understanding the other side's business. So what we've had with Forward is a great understanding. They understand that our business is we have to write papers to get leveraging for their funding. So we have a symbiotic relationship. With small startups which are really hungry, which I've got 3 startups to do at the moment, it's quite different because they actually live and die by the check each month they get. And so there's this hierarchy of things, like a small startup and really needs some results right now to get another round of investment. They don't need a paper. A Forward, which is probably a long-term relationship, wants to get some papers, get some multipliers, etc. So again, it's understanding the exact nature of the relationship you have with that industry partner and what they're trying to get out of it and what you are offering. So yeah.
Awesome. Due to time constraint, I think we'll take one last question. So we have this question from Ivan. How can we make staff movement between industry, national labs, and academic easier when they all apply different metrics to new staff? And in particular, university emphasis on papers, like what Peter mentioned.
Well, can I jump in here because this is a bit of a hobby horse for me. There are some structural issues. So, for example, people moving from, say, CSIRO to universities lose all their entitlements, while people from universities moving to CSIRO don't lose their entitlements. And it's something funny to do with state to federal movement. So that's one thing, which means that people will particularly when, so that's one thing, is that it means that your superannuation, I think it's not quite so bad now, but superannuation, particularly when you had defined benefit ones, which are rapidly becoming a thing of the past, had created golden handcuffs for people to stay in one place. the other is there's actually at the moment quite disparate salary differences between publicly funded agencies, universities, and industry. And so quite often, if people move around, they take a hit if they're moving from one place where the salary level is lower. So why would you do that? And then the other is that, as you said, the metrics are different. And to be honest, it is great that a lot of publications are written, but also volume is not necessarily good science. I actually would love to see the ARC, and I know Alan Finkel, Chief Scientist of Australia, has actually been pushing this, but hasn't succeeded in saying, instead of having, you know, truckloads of papers in your CV, you actually should just have your best 5 papers for the last 5 years, or maybe 10 at the most, and that it should be quality and not quantity, and that you should be trying to have you know, research that really is top class, rather than churning out lots of what I call make and bake papers, particularly in material. Make something, measure it, and publish a paper, instead of trying to understand the science deeply. And so that you have much richer, fuller, more interdisciplinary work. We bring a bit more modelling in, you know, just something which is really richer. But I think there's some serious things that need to change like that. And then I guess the other is, I think the ERA process means that there is a lack of appetite to bring people on board into universities who don't necessarily have stellar publication track records. Yeah. So that makes it very difficult to then have that mobility that, you know, into universities when they've got every reason, because the ERA process is terribly important for them. Their funding, I guess, or their reputations will rely on that. So that's also driving a perverse outcome as well.
Just to add to that, I mean, maybe we should have more joint appointments, you know, between sort of different, I mean, you know, DSD, CSIRO universities. I'd create a pool of funds and you know, so I can see that being of benefit. So no one's disadvantaged, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess I'll. Yeah. So I think it is an interesting time. I think that we do need to have much more movement, and it is difficult. And I think that what we've found at Deakin, we have the technology precinct with our menu futures on. So we have, I think, 15 companies on campus with us, and we have a lot of movement. We have people who actually are one day a fortnight employed within the company. It has caused problems because so our HR systems are not very good for this doing sort of thing, and we have this conflict of interest, because you're actually on one side working for a company who may be funding you, so it's a conflict of interest. But I think that I think that it is, and what it requires is, it requires at the highest level a preparedness to say, this is what we want to achieve. And I think as we become more risk adverse and more procedural, that is a problem. Whereas I think probably if I went back 10 years ago, I think it was actually easier. I think that people were prepared to say, well, we have this, you know, porous boundary, we can actually move across it. I think now people are becoming less porous. But it is possible, and yeah. So as I say, we've done it at Deakin, but and I think all the other universities also have, you know, but startup companies as well. And I think that's the real challenge to me is the startup company space, because that's what we need in Australia. We need more startup companies, and we need to work out how to make them work. No offense, Richard, with Ford, but you know, that's a good thing to have. But you know, what we need is, for every Ford, we need 20 startup companies. And I think that, you know, in materials, we are, you know, I think that Kathie will know better than me. I think we're ranked in the top 5, Kathie, is it in the world? I'm not sure. Top anyway. We're ranked really highly for materials in research in the whole world.
We are. Yeah.
And we, as Milan said, we had this great idea, Peter said, we had this great idea, we shovel stuff off to other places and it comes back value added to us. Whereas we actually are one of the best value adders in terms of actual technical capacity in the world. So to me, anything I can do to help a startup company get going is a real passion for me.
I guess the issue with startup companies, and I think we all have experienced that, it's the funding model, Peter. You know, how do they fund research? So, you know, when you've got the university targets, I mean, CSIRO's target of, 35 whatever % these days is, and it's always a challenge. So you tend to go for larger companies because of the, deeper pockets. But I agree with you, we need more startups.
So just things are changing a bit.
Yeah.
I think in the last few years since the NISA program in December 2016, we saw the creation of Main Sequence Ventures, which is investing in deep tech companies, and we've seen quite a lot of companies being invested in there. And they're looking for new companies to invest in. I think we've seen the ON program, which has given people a chance to look at where the market is and work through what's possible. And also Main Sequence Ventures offers what they call office hours, which helps people think about how to set up a company and what that might look like. And then, we're seeing in the universities collaboration hubs where startups can actually go and access equipment. And I know the one we have at Linfield has allowed companies to come in, access the equipment, which they use it pays, but they are able to be in that sort of environment that allows them to really accelerate their development of their product and potentially attract investor money. But the thing is, you can't start a company up on a Sunday afternoon. You have to actually jump ship really and completely commit to it. And I think what we have is we don't have too many examples of people going out starting a company. There's a chance it will fail, or and then coming back into organisations. Although there is growing numbers of that, but we don't necessarily hear about it. So I think there's a great opportunity to do more sharing of case studies and examples, so that we hear from people who have gone out and started a company, and then it may not have worked, or it's gone off overseas and it's gone out of their control, and then people go back into the research force again. So it'd be really interesting to see if we can tease some of those examples out.
Would the other panel members like to add in more to that? Awesome.
So within Ford, before Corona, obviously, there's quite a bit of, we have sabbaticals with profs, from US schools. We've had some of the Australian researchers spend some time in Dearborn. So we do this, and there's definitely value in doing that. As you can imagine, we better understand each other's challenges and problems, and can therefore work on them more effectively. But how you make that happen more easily, I don't know. I guess it's got more to do with bureaucracy and administration, and for the most part, and budgets. Is there funding available to travel? At least in Ford's case.
So just quickly, I've received another question. It says, can a researcher own a company while working within academia, following models in the US universities? And if yes, what support is available for the researcher for business?
Where is Ivan online? You can comment, Ivan.
Yes, you can potentially do that, but there are issues like Peter said about conflict of interest and how you differentiate. But as a university researcher, you can have a stake in a company.
Yeah.
Yes.
But as a CSIRO person, you can't. So it depends on. It's not universal.
No.
No, at Deakin, I was actually the co-director of a company myself, but I had to write to the Vice Chancellor for approval. and I think that's not unusual. I also have another colleague now with the Form Flow program, and the same thing, they had to get approval from the DBCR, if not the Vice Chancellor, to actually have that, because both conflict of interest, but also just complicated, just HR stuff in the university crap. Sorry to say.
You've got to be careful that you can't, once research becomes commercial, you've got to be very careful about competitive neutrality, about why are we putting public money into this company which hasn't been done in a commercial or in a competitive process. So it's actually, you've just got to be really careful and set your business up right. And it's pretty hard, especially in deep tech, to actually run a business and be a researcher, I mean, a university professor at the same time. It's, I think one of the things you've got to remember is in the USA, they actually only get paid 9 months of the year for their role in a university, and then they have 3 months where they have to find their own funds. And so a lot of researchers either get grants for that, or that's where they do their business, their company stuff. And so it's actually a slightly different model. So, and if you look at universities like Stanford, which is in Silicon Valley, everyone sort of keeps saying, oh, that's the model. Well, actually, they don't commercialize anything. What they do is they see their research, well, their academics or students leave the organization and set up, in the Silicon Valley environment, a business. And then if they do well, they actually leave endowments to the university, and they make a lot of money from just people remembering their alma mater, who got them up and going. And that's sort of a cultural thing that you wouldn't think, if your business is successful, you would absolutely not dream of giving a return back, even though there's no particular contract or anything like that in place expecting it.
No, I agree. That's very true. And I think that, but, as I say, I think we can do it in Australia, but there are a lot of examples. You just have to go through the right processes. What I thought with a lot of time was, of course, people going through the back door and doing things because they thought it was a good thing to do. And so when I was DBCR, I had to fix up a lot of problems because people just felt that, oh, I'll go and set up a company. And they hadn't thought through the whole process. So I think there are ways around it, but you just have to be upfront about it. Because I think most universities do want to see companies. They want to be part of that, because the impact statements is very strong now. Translation of our research, but anyway.
We're running out of time, so I'm just gonna see if any of you would like to add in to the discussion, just final comments before we end off. Awesome. So on this note, I would just like to thank all the speakers for the discussion and their insights, and everyone for your participation. Ivan would like to take over for a minute for now.
I just want to, firstly, again, thank the speakers and the audience. It's been a wonderful discussion. Materials Australia, at least the Victoria to Tasmania branch, is trying a couple of new things during this COVID. One is having these virtual meetings, and this is the second of our virtual meetings. We'll have one the end of this month in conjunction with the ACA and SEAM on coding technologies, both hard coding and soft codings, and one next month on the hydrogen economy. So we welcome you to all of those, and hope you can attend, whether you're Materials Australia members or not. The other thing that we are experimenting is trying to softly change our gender and age balance. And to do that, we have asked a number of very enthusiastic and skilled people onto our committee. And Roo is one of those leaders, along with Jafu and a number of other PhD students. So I'd just like to thank Roo for the effort and the skill in which she has organised this meeting for us, and her team of younger PhDs that have supported her. So thank you very much, Roo, and thank you very much, panel.
Thank you, everyone.
Back to you, Roo.
So the recording for this event will be up on the Materials Australia website, and so feel free to share it with your colleagues or your friends. There will be a summary report drafted by Ivan, and this will be sent to the speakers shortly for commenting, and this will be posted up in the Materials Australia magazine shortly after the event as well. So I'll keep in contact with the panel members. Thank you all for your participation and have a good day.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you all.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Roo. Well chaired.
Bye. Well chaired.